topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, good to have you with us. I'm Bill Martinez, and I'm excited to be sharing with you our next guest, former Capitol Police Officer Tarik Johnson, TK Johnson, here to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but what really happened on January the 6th. I understand, we've had congressional hearings. There's been, so much reported about January 6th, but I can tell you the majority of Americans are still scratching their head going, wait a minute, we're being worked here. We're not being told the whole truth. There's something seems to be missing from this controlled narrative. And I will say this up front. Yes, there were some heroes on January 6th, and let's say on both sides, okay? But I think that there are some heroes that were not acknowledged. And after you hear TK Johnson's story, you'll understand what I'm referring to. TK Johnson was a 22-year veteran on the Capitol Hill force. He considers himself to be an expert in the field. He will tell you he worked hard through all of certifications to learn what to do and how to responsibly step up and handle his position. On January 6th, as the on-site commander who was in charge of securing the certification of the 2020 presidential election, despite pleas for help on January 6th, Johnson said he did not hear anything, not even from the Capitol Police Chief Assistant Yogananda Pittman, who allegedly kept vital information about the protests from him. Let's welcome Tarik Johnson, TK Johnson, to the show. TK, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me on, Bill. I appreciate it very much.
Well, I'll tell you, our audience is one that believes in the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but. That's what this show is all about. So we're grateful to you to come on, to have the courage to tell your story, because we know what happens in Washington, D.C. The theme is it must stay in Washington, D.C., and it must be controlled by those who control the narrative. If somebody gets outside of that line, then you feel the full pressure of the forces that want you to comport, correct?
That is absolutely correct.
So let's go back prior to January the 6th. I mean, here you are, you know what you're doing. Explain to our audience your background. I said that, because I've heard you say time and again in other shows that you consider yourself an expert. And I believe that you are an expert. You speak with conviction. You speak with experience. Explain to our audience why you were the one that needed to be there in the place that you were at on January the 6th.
Okay, let me start with giving the audience a little bit about my background.
Okay.
I was actually on the police department for 23 and a half years at the time I resigned in September of 2022. I started out as a regular officer in the rank of private, and I started March 1999 is when I started. And I took a test to get promoted to special agent. I was primarily assigned to Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont, and I did that for approximately 2 years, and then I took the sergeant's exam, and I passed the sergeant's exam the first time I took it. Got promoted to sergeant in December of 2004, and I worked pretty much every division on every section on Capitol Hill other than the Library of Congress in my time as a sergeant. I won Office of the Year in 2012. You can probably Google that. Google my name. There was a tunnel bus fire in the D Street Tunnel in 2012, and I had to help evacuate officers. I had the help of officers to evacuate people out of that tunnel, and we got them out safely. And me, and along with two other officers, we were awarded the Office of the Year in 2012. I took the lieutenant's exam and I was promoted to lieutenant in June of 2018. And I was assigned to the Capital Division, and I worked the Capital Division from June of 2018 until January 6th of 2021, the time of the counting of the electoral votes. That was my actual last day of working at the Capitol Police.
Wow.
And I was suspended for approximately 17 months. And when I returned to work, I processed in during the first week. I went out on leave, and then I processed out after about 2 months of being on leave. And I left the department on September 23rd of 2022. I knew that I could never go back to work again, knowing everything that I knew that Yogananda Pittman had done before, on, and after January 6th. I could never work for her again, knowing what I knew.
Was there any consequence for Ms. Pittman and her failure? It appears to be a failure of duty here.
It was more than a failure of duty. She had intel that we needed on, actually we needed the intel before January 6th. Mm-hmm. She had the intel. She got the intel sometime late December of 2020. One of the main focus, or the main report that she had, was an intel report, and it was numbered 21 TD 159, and it basically laid out what was going to occur on January 6th. She had it, and she sat on it, and she didn't give it to Chief Sun, who was the actual chief of the Capitol Police during that time, or the other assistant, which was her counterpart, Assistant Chief Chad Thomas. She didn't give it to him either, and Chad Thomas was directly in charge of my bureau, which was operations. Mm-hmm. So we would have had to prepare the officers for what was going to occur that day. She got the intel. She was supposed to give that intel to Chief Sun and Chief Thomas so we could prepare for January 6th, and she didn't do it.
Who gave her the intel?
The intel report was created from her unit. She was in charge of IICD. That's our intel division. She's in charge of that. They go out to get the intel, gather the intelligence, they put it on a report, and they send it to her. She got the report, and she didn't send it out to anybody else from her unit. Now, the people who created and would have been responsible for gathering the intel, they can't just send it out of her bureau without her permission. She has to do that, and she didn't do it.
Well, and this is important for people to understand the strict adherence to chain of command, right?
Correct.
So here it is. She has the information the latter part of December. At any point from that day, we're 3 years down the road, was anybody able to find out who told her not to distribute that information, or was that a unilateral decision on her part?
She has never been asked that question publicly as of yet.
And she hasn't even been in front of a congressional hearing to go ahead.
Yeah, she's been in in front of multiple congressional hearings, but that wasn't the question that was asked of her. And some people would say the committees that she came before were pretty friendly to her. So she was never really asked the tough questions.
Well, and that was the thing, and I mentioned this in the opening, TK, that there was such a spirit within Congress of just, extreme glory and honor to all Capitol Police, that as if they did everything correct. I mean, even to the point where you have a Capitol Police officer shoots and kills a civilian. And first of all, he's protected. And then afterwards, he's almost made into a hero.
Well, I know a lot of people have difference of opinion as it relates to the shooting. Mm-hmm. And what I've always said, I'm not going to be able to convince you or anybody else if he should or if he shouldn't have done it. I say that, and I say this repeatedly. And I think that all of us will agree on this. He should have never been put in that situation in the first place. Never.
Exactly. Right.
If the intel would have been distributed, the even the people, the demonstrators who broke into the Capitol that day, they wouldn't have been able to do that. Their lives were changed because you had Yogananda Pittman, and I routinely call her she's an unethical, overly ambitious, immoral commander is what she was. She had the intel that would have that Son needed, and had he been able to use that intel that she had, he could have went to the sergeant at arms on the Senate and the House. Mm-hmm. The House sergeant at arms, his name was Paul Irving. The Senate sergeant at arms was Michael Stinger. So he has to get their permission to get the National Guard's assistance. And from him speaking to both of them, the intel didn't support his request for the National Guard. That's only because he didn't have the intel report that Yogananda Pittman sat on. So he could have gotten the intel. He could have gotten the intel report from her, forwarded that intel report over to Paul Irving and Mike Stinger, and then he would have more than likely got more help from the National Guard and even more law enforcement officers there on site. And what I routinely have said is that, and I know that everybody's going to blame the demonstrators for what they did, and I understand people's position. If somebody did something illegal, they need to be held accountable.
Exactly.
So the issue is not that the demonstrators are being held accountable; they are absolutely being held accountable, right. even unfairly being held accountable, because you don't know what Yogananda Pittman did before and during January 6th, which contributed to their extra charges. Mm-hmm. Or could what she did be a mitigating factor in their sentencing and their prosecutions? I believe so, but we won't know until she is asked the correct questions. And one of the things that I've said, and I was going to say this a minute ago, laws are here to protect people. That's what you make laws, and that's what law enforcement officers, that's what we do. Exactly. We were supposed to protect the demonstrators from themselves by having the appropriate show of force there. And a lot of those people would have said, you know what, I'm not going to go any further. I'm not going to try to push past all these National Guard people. Some of those people would have went home. But basically, Yogananda Pittman not giving that intel report to Chief Son and Chad Thomas basically compromised our security to the point where it was almost inviting people in.
I was going to say, yeah, exactly. It seems like the way you look at it, and like you said, everybody's going to have a different story. We're all seeing it from a different angle. But I remember as I was seeing it unfold, I'm looking at this and I'm going, this appears like a bit of a setup. And then you start hearing more of the background, your story. Stephen Son has since written a book called Courage Under Fire. He talks about being outnumbered 58-1 and to support what you're saying. He said he asked for National Guard 3 days prior, but it was denied. So, and we already know that President Trump had already authorized the use of National Guard, because that's one of the first things that need to happen. So they had clearance there. Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser also had to go along and see it. Muriel Bowser later said she didn't like the optics of having the National Guard there in the situation. So a lot of, whether Muriel Bowser, I just can't imagine Nancy Pelosi didn't have the information to understand that there were going to be hundreds of thousands of people coming to the Capitol building, protesting the outcome of the 2020 election. That was quite, to me, that was quite obvious. And so now you're starting to see this unfold, and being the experienced police officer that you are, you're starting to realize, whoa, I mean, the tools that you should have, they're not there. You're trying to communicate with Yogananda Pittman because she's in charge. She's at command center, right? She is the one to authorize all movements and any kind of decisions that need to be made to handle the crowd, correct?
That is correct. And you are a little bit incorrect on one thing you said. You said that it may have been a setup. It was absolutely 100% a setup. And me being an experienced law enforcement officer and I was a commander, my job, I was one of the commanders in charge of security for the certification of the election. So I'm an expert in my field and I'm great at what I do.
Right.
So I know what the ramifications are if Yogananda Pittman has the type of intelligence that she has and she sits on it. So now I don't know if the average person that is listening to your broadcast know, but I do know. Chief Son knows.
Yes.
You can't withhold that type of intelligence without a consequence. And that's what she did. So we need to dive into that. But it even gets worse though, Bill. So if you listen to, now this is what every American needs to do. Every single American, if you have any doubts to whether January 6th was a setup or not, just listen to the radio transmissions. And you need to listen to primarily two voices. You need to listen to my voice. My call sign was 405J John. And you need to listen to Yogananda Pittman's voice. Her unit was unit 2. You need to listen to all the radio transmissions from, at the very least, from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And you listen to my radio transmissions and you listen to Yogananda Pittman's transmissions. The radio transmissions, Bill, are public. If anybody needs to know if this is a setup, just listen to the radio transmissions. That's all you have to do. They're public.
How many times did you request help from Yogananda Pittman and she didn't answer you?
I probably begged her for assistance, maybe at least 5 to 7 times at least. And I got to a point, Bill, where I got tired of begging her and I had to make decisions. And I was angry. And if you listen to the radio transmissions, I did make some snide comments because I was angry that this was occurring and you're not helping. And one of the reasons, now I don't know if you know this, Bill, but I was the one to make the call to evacuate the Senate.
Yes, I was aware of this. Yes, exactly. Go ahead and tell our audience.
Okay, so now the audience may not know this, but I was the one that evacuated the Senate. I ordered the evacuation at 2:28.
Without authorization from Yogananda Pittman. You asked her for it. She refused to give it, but you knew that this was starting to become dire, that a command decision had to be made. And you knew when you were making that decision that you were out of the chain of command.
100%. And the reason too, and people are going to try to beat up on the demonstrators too, but this is the thing. They were angry. You had people who actually believed that the election was stolen from them. So you know that they're angry. Right. So why not just get the members of Congress out of the building to de-escalate the situation, to protect the demonstrators from themselves? And that's what I did, because had I not done that if you would have been in the Capitol and you would have ran into a member of Congress, even though like all you didn't commit any violence, but you bumped into a member of Congress, they may have added the terrorism enhancement to your charge of unlawful entry.
And you just accidentally happened to bump into them. The other thing too, TK, I'd like to get your read on this, and that was the use of force. We've spoken with several use of force experts and said that the use of force that day was off the charts. It was out of the books. It was inappropriate. That added to the anger of the crowd, because when you go to disperse, as you know, you're an expert in this, you know better than I do, certainly. And I'm only repeating information and reports that I've gotten from other experts. They said that whenever you send off canisters or rubber bullets, it's always to the ground. It's to the feet. It's never to the upper body or the heads of the demonstrators. And what happened repeatedly was these shells were being aimed and targeted at the heads or chests of people. Now, we know 2 people had heart attacks there, but they said that clearly these experts in use of force said that if you they've determined this over experience, that you incite the crowd by hurting them, by aiming at their chest and their head and doing damage. You do not disperse, because the objective of use of force is to disperse the crowd, and they did just the opposite. They actually incited the crowd, is what the use of experts said. Is that fair to say from your perspective?
You know what? I will say this. I will say yes, but let me add this caveat.
Okay.
If you want that to happen, all you have to do is sit on the intelligence, right?
Yes.
That this is going to happen. Now, had we had the intelligence prior, back in December when Pittman had it, we would have done what we call tabletop exercise. We would have started to prepare, because most of the officers, Metropolitan and Capitol Police, had never been involved in a situation like that where there were so many people, the fence line was broken. Also, when you have your command leadership ghost you when you're begging for help. So the officers have never really been in the situation. And Bill, this is why I consistently say the officers and the demonstrators were all set up. They set this up for this to happen because you didn't prepare us for a situation like that.
Exactly.
And we would have had weeks and weeks to prepare for it had Yogananda Pittman gave us the intelligence. So which, if you want that to occur, you withhold the intelligence, and that's what occurred. Everybody on the ground was set up, and I'm hoping and I pray every day almost that we get together, the law enforcement officers and the demonstrators there, we get together and let's focus on what Yogananda Pittman, because she was the one that did this to all of us. She victimized all of us, and I believe she should be the focus of everybody that was on the ground that day, police and demonstrators.
Exactly. TK, I do want to scroll. I did take down the information on the givesendgo.com /TK Johnson, and we're scrolling that. Explain to our audience, we're just going to pause for just a moment and help you, because in my humble opinion, you are one of the unnoted heroes of what happened on January the 6th. And we're going to get into more detail, but for our audience that would like to help you out, explain, the Give, Send, Go program that you have.
I'll explain it briefly, and thank you for putting it on here too for me. I didn't expect that, but thank you very much. I set it up. A friend of mine set it up because I never wanted to ask for any help. I never knew that. I thought that after I came out and started speaking publicly about what really occurred on January 6th, that this would be over quickly and I can go get a regular job befitting of my skills and abilities. But when you talk about a job like that, there are a lot of restrictions that you can't talk to the media. And I didn't want a job like that because I could not speak about what really occurred on January 6th because people are hurting. So I got a job moving furniture and setting up table and chairs for events, which was easy, didn't pay much. So I took a huge pay cut, but I didn't care about that because I don't really care about money. So now this has languished on way longer than I thought, because then I realized that in addition to the setup that Yogananda Pittman concocted, there was a major cover up, and that was led by the current chief of police, J. Thomas Major. So I've been fighting on both ends. So if you look at my Twitter feed, sometimes I'm discussing Pittman, sometimes I'm discussing Major, and I'm not focused on getting a job that I can do that would fix my financial situation, because this is what I want to do. This is what I dedicated my life to, is getting J6 justice for everybody that was aggrieved on both sides of this.
Well, the other thing, too, that's hanging in the balance of all this, TK, is your First Amendment right, your freedom of speech. And here you have a choice. You can stay employed by the Capitol Police Department. And here, in a sense, you were compelled to resign your position, less than 2 years from retirement and all benefits.
17 months.
Right? Okay. So you could have been a quote unquote good boy, as they say, and taken one for the team, bit your tongue. But for the sake of our Constitution and a First Amendment right to make sure that the whole truth and nothing but is put out there, you surrender your financial security. Our audience needs to understand that. You talk about, here you got Steve Sun, who writes the book, Courage Under Fire. You are a profile in courage, you and of yourself in the story and your family that's all involved in this.
Yeah. I could write a book, but I'm not focused on doing any of that. There are people that are probably in jail that are innocent. Yes. There are people that are in jail, even if they are guilty of something, they may have more charges attributed to them. Right. So I can't focus on me making money. Now, the Gifts and Go that I set up, a friend of mine set up for me, because he was like, TK, he says, you're only in the second quarter of this fight. Right. I didn't expect it to go this long. And he said, you need funds. So he told me that this is basically what I had to do.
Right.
And he was right, because I was, I looked at my
Thank God for friends, TK.
Yeah, no question. And then he got me on the right track. And then I was working a security job on the weekend. So because of the gifts and go that I set up, I didn't have to work every single weekend anymore. And it got me time to do a lot of J6 work. And I got a lot accomplished. I've done a lot of interviews. So I got some stuff taken care of, so, and it is because of the community, and I appreciate it.
Well, I want you to know we honor you. We honor your courage to come on the show to tell your story, because this is so important, because we know the information that we're getting from the government, it is one-sided. It is a narrative. I mean, even to the point, as you know, the J6 committee that spent a lot of the people's money to investigate what happened in January 6th. And they were told before they disbanded to hold on to all the evidence. And these scoundrels, bleach bit, they did a Hillary Clinton. They got rid of all the evidence, all the information that we, the people, paid for. They destroyed it so that the incoming new majority of the Republican Party would no longer have access and all the bases and background information of everything that they had conducted in the previous months.
I can tell you this, they didn't delete anything from me because they never interviewed me. I never got to testify.
Amazing.
And yeah.
Why do you think that they didn't interview you?
Because they knew what I was going to say. They knew that the narrative, because I called. Now I don't know if you know about this, Bill, but I knew it was Yogananda Pittman's fault immediately.
Yes.
And I called on January 9th to report it. I was looking for FBI contact. So I called a friend of mine, Senator Patrick Leahy of Vermont, and I told him what Yogananda Pittman did and what she was doing. And an hour after I made the call to him, because when I called him, I just wanted an FBI contact to let them know that this is not what it looks like, because she literally let this happen. And I told Senator Leahy she was going to let everybody die that day. She wasn't going to help anybody. And when I say that, it would have been, I did it for the officers, demonstrators, and the members of Congress.
Exactly.
And I basically told him what she was doing. And then he said he was going to give me an FBI contact, or he was going to call his chief of staff. We hung up the phone. An hour later, the Capitol Police called me and told me I was suspended. So I found out later that Pittman had already known everything, and she suspended me.
Right.
So they knew I was going.
But Leahy didn't help you. I mean, he could have put you under, a whistleblower status, couldn't he have?
I don't know exactly what he could have done, because the whistleblower protections for Capitol Police officers are extremely poor. And with J. Thomas Manger, who was the current chief, he's not allowing Capitol Police officers to be covered under the Whistleblower Protection Act. So they can't go out and speak without fear of retaliation. So that's what they're doing.
Right. So you got thrown under the bus real quick, and you were put on suspension for 17 months. Was that without pay or with pay?
It was with pay, but obviously no overtime. Right. I had to stay in the house. I couldn't leave my house from the hours of 8 to 4. I couldn't.
Wait a minute. You had to stay in the house. You were basically on house arrest.
I was on house. It's basically effectively a house arrest. I couldn't step off my property. I couldn't go for a jog in my neighborhood. After 16 months, they did give me permission to go for a run in my neighborhood after 16 months. Because I went next. But and I was so stressed during this particular time. I was checking my mail one day, and I dropped the mail. It was a windy day, so the mail came out of my mailbox and went into the street. And I didn't know if I could go pick it up without calling the Capitol Police first. Because I knew what they were going to do to me. So I literally looked at the mail and tried to make a decision. Should I pick the mail up, or should I call the Capitol Police first? Because I would have to step into the street to get my mail.
So did they have your home geofence, so to speak, to where they would have known if you stepped over a barrier?
No, they wouldn't have known that. But my mental, because I was suspended so long, not knowing what they were going to do, but knowing that they were going to crush me. Yes. I didn't want to make my situation worse if they had a camera, if they were looking at me, because they would have said, you stepped off your property. We told you not to step off the property. You are now suspended and fired, suspended without pay, waiting for termination. So I said, I'm not taking any chances. But I said, you know what? I got to get my mail. I ran and got my mail, worried for the few days, called my attorney, told my attorney that I stepped off. My attorney probably thought I was nuts, but I was stressed because
can you say paranoid? Understandably paranoid?
No question. I was paranoid because I couldn't understand after everything that I did that I evacuated the Senate. I evacuated the House. I led those evacuations. My officers had to do the work, but I instructed them over the radio.
Yeah.
All this is on radio transmissions. Like, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it, but if you listen to it, because a lot of people probably say, I'm not going to listen to it because it's a way because we're trying to attack the demonstrators. No, don't listen for the officers' reactions. Listen to what leadership did, specifically Unit 2. Just listen to the radio transmissions from 1 to 3 to 4. And if you can't see that what occurred on January 6th was a setup, then you have to be deaf. Yeah. Just listen to the radio transmissions.
Exactly. Well, TK, when they suspended you for 17 months, did they say right off the bat it was 17 months, or was it 6 months where we're going to do it another 6 months? How did they determine 17 months?
Well, I guess it just worked out that way due to various reasons. And I won't get into everything, but part of it was I was under criminal investigation for wearing a MAGA hat. Yes. So now I don't know if you know about the MAGA hat situation.
Yeah, we've got a picture of you with the MAGA hat, and of course a picture of the MAGA hat as well. And people need to hear the story of how that MAGA hat, in a sense, probably saved your life, allowed you to have access to save the lives of fellow officers that were trapped.
Yes, and during that interaction, I was criminally investigated because two of the people who helped me get up those steps and back down were oath keepers, and I had never even heard of an oath keeper before January 6th.
Oh wow!
And so now we know what the oath keepers were because of basically the trial and everything. But they just wanted to help me get my officers who were trapped, and one of the officers had made a radio transmission that they were gassed and maced and they couldn't move, and they were stuck at a certain part of that.
The top of the Capitol building, right?
Yeah. I'm trying. Yeah, there's still some stuff that I can't talk about when it comes to that. So, but more will be coming out later. But those two men helped me get up the steps, get the officers.
These are the two oath keepers that helped you. They made a way. They could make a way in the crowd because the people knew the oath keepers were friendly and they were supporting you to to liberate these officers who were trapped up there, right?
100%.
And along the way, one of the people puts a MAGA hat on your head.
Correct.
And that kind of gave you a little bit of cover, didn't it?
Well, I got the MAGA hat. I tried to get the officers out twice. The first time I was unsuccessful. And then the second time I was able to get them with the help of those two oath keepers.
Right.
So on the first trip, when I went up and I went back down, on the way back down, somebody reached over and stuck a MAGA hat on my head. I didn't know what he was doing. And then he put the MAGA hat on my head, and I asked him if I could keep it, but he wanted the hat back. And another person in the crowd was listening, and he said, well, you can have my hat if this guy wants his back. So I can't remember which hat I ended up with, but I ended up with one of those hats. Right. And then when I got to the bottom of the steps, maybe 20 minutes later is when I kept the hat on while I was standing out there. And then obviously you see a black officer with a MAGA hat on. It made an interesting conversation. So some people came up to me and started talking to me, and I told them what I needed. And then we went up there and got the officers down.
Let me ask you if we can rewind for just a moment. Here, January 6th, you see all this unfolding. You say, wow, this is a trap. This is a setup. What happened when the Capitol came under attack with BLM and Antifa? What was it? 8 months earlier. Well, was there a prequel? Was there advance notice? Was there planning? And information that was given to Capitol Police about the potential disruption and protest of BLM and Antifa?
Well, actually, the Black Lives Matter, that was at the White House. That wasn't at the Capitol.
Well, but okay, but still in the vicinity regard, right? Because they were there at Lafayette Square across the street from the Capitol, tried to burn down the church, as we know. President Trump had to be secured. But regardless, I mean, you've got a government, a federal, the White House in this particular case, being put under siege. Were you given, or were you responsible at all in dealing with that protest?
No, not at all.
Because you're confined to the Capitol solely 100%, right?
To the Capitol buildings, like we have the Library of Congress, we have the Senate buildings, and the House of Representatives buildings. Mm-hmm. So that's my span of control right there.
Was there any intel, any after action report of what happened with BLM and Antifa shared with Capitol Police? Because you're not that far away in the Capitol building and the White House, and you're talking about security. Was there any discussion and shared information between Capitol Police and the police department of DC?
Not to my knowledge. But that wouldn't have went to me. That would have went more likely to Yogananda Pittman. That would have went to her unit, maybe Chad Thomas' unit, but no, mm-hmm. It wouldn't have made it to me.
Well, based on your experience, do you think that would have been useful?
As far as
just training purposes, understanding
any information, all of it would have been useful. Mm-hmm. Especially the intel saying that what was going to actually occur at the Capitol would have been absolutely useful, and we couldn't even get that. So, expecting Pittman to give us, intel and talk to us about Antifa and Black Lives Matter when she wouldn't even tell us what was going to happen at our own building that she knew. No.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're talking with the former Capitol Police officer, Tarik Johnson, sharing the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but what really happened on January 6th. And it is the truth, and his commitment to his command in securing the Capitol building and those in it, senators and congressmen and congresswomen. He ends up being suspended. He is no longer part of the Capitol Police. Sadly, you think of somebody with this kind of experience and talent, and to not have him be a part of the operation to this day, I believe, in my humble opinion, is a great loss to our country and the Capitol Police force. Now, let's go back and revisit for a moment here. You shared very quickly when it came down for you to make a decision. You're on comms trying to get Yogananda Pittman to make a decision to clear the Senate, to clear Congress, get the congressmen, get the senators, get them to safety, because, even as Stephen Sun said, in these numbers, I'd not heard the numbers 58-1. I know you had said before that you were greatly outmanned. That I guess the bottom line is, if this was truly an insurrection, you, and I say you, the Capitol Police would have been easily outgunned and overwhelmed.
100%. And no, this was not an insurrection. I've said this multiple times. Now, I would have said, like, I did say it was an insurrection like in 2021, but I started finding out more information, and people have to be able to change their position when presented new facts. And the facts just don't present that. This was just basically a coup set up by Yogananda Pittman. Now, she did it because I believe she did it because she wanted Sun fired as the chief of police, and she wanted to gain favor from Nancy Pelosi is why she did it. So now,
interesting. Yeah.
Yes. So all you have to do, I would say, if anybody really wants to know what really occurred on January 6th, you have to listen to the radio transmissions first and then work your way back. And then find out what intel she had before January 6th. That's all you have to do. Once you listen to the radio transmissions, which the committees that were in 2021 and 2022 never focused on those radio transmissions.
Yeah, of course not.
And if you have, all you have to do is get somebody who doesn't have a vested interest. They can be Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. Who doesn't have a vested interest in the outcome of the investigation, to look at it, listen to the radio transmissions, ask certain questions, and then you'll easily know, because, and I've said this multiple times, if the amount of people that were there, if they wanted to take over the Capitol, we couldn't have stopped them.
Right.
Now, even the movie 300. I know you heard of that movie 300, and
Yes.
and those, and I don't know if you know, all those people died.
Yes.
They all died in that movie. So
Yes.
people, it wasn't like they beat up 10,000 people. They died.
Yes.
So, and the thing was, they were just trying to hold like that ridge for a certain amount of time. They knew they were going to die, but they wanted to hold a ridge for a certain amount of time. And we were outnumbered. And the thing was, we weren't protecting a ridge. They could have came in, and they did come in on all sides of the building. We were surrounded fairly quickly. If they wanted to get in, now, obviously, we know there was some violence that occurred on January 6th. But if they wanted to take over and kill all the members of Congress, we couldn't have stopped them if that was the purpose of everybody there. So when people get charged, they should only be charged with what they did. The problem that you have, Bill, is that everybody that is getting arrested for January 6th, when they're at the defense table, the jury is looking at all of them as insurrectionists.
Right.
That's the difficult part. They want to get
because of the narrative. It's the narrative that's out there. I mean, you use a professional multimedia producer director who cherry picks information and clips, from January 6th and presents it in the most negative of light to be consistent with what they wanted us to know. This is a thing that we say repeatedly on the show, TK. I asked the question, who told you? Who told you it was an insurrection? Do you know that? And I challenge our audience. I said, look, even like here, you and I are talking and you're answering questions and you're being very forthright. And I'm grateful for your honesty and transparency on this. But I caution our audience all the time. I said, look, don't just take my word for it. Don't just take TK's word for it. He's told you several times where to go and listen for some information and see if your journey into fact finding will either reaffirm or deny what he's presented to you. Is that fair to say?
That's perfect to say. I'm not asking anybody to believe me. All I'm asking you to do is do your own research. Exactly. All you have to do is listen to the radio transmissions and listen for Unit 2, and that's Yogananda Pittman, and listen for me, 405J John, and then you make the determination if what I did deserved to be suspended for 17 months and basically constructively fired. But at the end of the day, I never was going to go back because I could never work for Yogananda Pittman, knowing what she did on that day alone. What I found out after I resigned was even worse. And all the people who came out, the whistleblowers who came to speak against Yogananda Pittman and how she, along with J. Thomas Manger, crushed him, I'm glad I left.
How many years did you work under Yogananda Pittman?
She was there for 22 years. I was there for 23. She was my direct commander. One time while I was there, I was a sergeant at the Capitol. She was a captain. And now, as assistant chief, if I'm not in her bureau, I don't work directly for her, but she is still technically one of my bosses, but she's been over me probably for, I think she got promoted around 2008, 2009 to lieutenant or something like that. So from 2009 to 2021.
Did you suspect that there was a breakdown in leadership? Did you observe something that would cause you to be cautious prior to January the 6th?
Nothing. They didn't put anything out to operations. Now, I'm an operation commander at the Capitol, and you don't tell me what's going to occur on January 6th when you knew.
Exactly. Who opened the doors to the Capitol building and who authorized those officers to, because we see it on video where they're waving, the protesters into the building. Who authorized that?
Well, now a lot of, now I don't know, you have to look at the times that this occurred at the end. Like, I would have to go back and see the times and actually see the video. But a lot of times when people were just basically allowed into the building, the Capitol had already been evacuated of members of Congress on the Senate and the House. And this is what I believe, unless somebody shows me something that counters that. And we knew that it was the officers, and I haven't spoken to the officers, and I haven't spoken to many officers since I left because I never really went back. I never went back to work again. But it was
TK, you got friends there. You got
Oh,
brothers in arms. I mean, to cut yourself off and not have that connection, that's got to be personally painful.
Well, yeah, my wife worked there too. I met my wife there. We got married. So my wife was there, and it's funny because they say all hands on deck. My wife was an officer there, was at home, and she wasn't sick or anything. They just told her to stay home and basically relax. So it was not all hands on deck. You should have had everybody there. That wasn't done. There was so much that needed to occur on January 6th, but didn't happen.
What's happened? Has anything happened adversely to your wife because of your situation?
She was old enough to retire.
Okay.
I wasn't there. My wife's a little bit older than I am, so she got to retire, and I could not. She had her 25 years, and she left.
I see. Okay. So she knew that this was a bad situation, and I imagine heartbroken to see what they had done to her husband. We've got about 5 minutes left here, TK, and I want to give you an opportunity to kind of summarize your story, remind everybody about Give, Send, Go, how we can come alongside and support you and your family.
I'll be brief with the Give, Send, Go. If you can help. It keeps me in the fight, keeps me on Twitter, it keeps me doing interviews. I don't have to work so much. I can take off from my part-time job, which I work security on the weekends. And my Give, Send, Go has helped me not do that, so I can do interviews and still spend a little bit of time with the family. And I don't have to focus so much on trying to get a new job and to be silenced in any way, because I don't want that.
Exactly.
Now, I want to summarize this and I want to basically make it as simple as I can. January 6th, there's two fundamental principles about January 6th. Number one, you had the setup of what occurred on that day that was led by Yogananda Pittman. You had the cover up, which is occurring now. That is led by Chief J. Thomas Manger. He wants the J6 narrative to remain the same for political purposes because he and his wife are heavily involved in the Democratic Party, and he needs for the narrative to stay exactly what it is to ensure that Donald Trump doesn't get elected and reelected in 2024. So that is his primary purpose, and he has to do that by protecting Yogananda Pittman. And I go into great detail on Twitter. So if anybody wants to follow me on Twitter, please do, and you'll be getting updates, and I give tidbits of information. So you need to know that Pittman was the cause of, she was the setup, and J. Thomas Manger is the cover-up. That's what you need to know. You need to know that the radio transmissions are public, and you need to listen to those radio transmissions. Unit 2, which is Yogananda Pittman. Unit 405, J. John, which is me. Listen to that. And then you have to look at and listen to some of the congressional hearings that Yogananda Pittman did, specifically when it comes to the intelligence that she did not pass to Chief Manger, to Chief Thomas and to Chief Son. Now, you're going to listen to, if you listen to the congressional testimony that she gave in February, she's going to say that she did give it, but that wasn't true. And she never went back to correct the record. That needs to occur. And now, at the end of the day, and the audience needs to know this, the J6 community needs to know this, that they're not going to be able to cover this up forever. They just need to cover it up and keep everything concealed as much as they can until after 2024. Then they can start letting some stuff go. But the election, the presidential election will already be over. So if you keep the narrative the same, then obviously you're going to get, if you're going to vote Biden, if you're an ardent Biden supporter, you're voting Biden. If you're an ardent Trump supporter, you're going to vote for Trump. But if you're in the middle, those are the votes that J. Thomas Manger wants to go to Biden. And I've told people this repeatedly, that the United States Capitol Police should not be used as a Democratic weapon against former President Donald J. Trump. The Capitol Police needs to remain neutral, period. They need to be neutral.
One final question here. Where's Steve's son in all this?
Steve's son is still processing everything. And I think that if you listen to his last interview that he did on Tucker, on X, and he did the he gave congressional testimony, and he's starting to probably see that Pittman had a bigger I guess, role in what occurred on January 6th.
So like you said, the truth is finding its way out. TK, we got to leave it there. I cannot thank you enough for your courage, for your support of the U.S. Constitution. You're a fellow constitutionalist. And I got to tell you, I love you for that, because this is what we need. We need patriots that aren't about a party, but they're about the American idea that was born out of our Declaration of Independence and our U.S. Constitution. And clearly there are forces that want to do everything they can to topple our rights as citizens as enumerated in our U.S. Constitution. Again, I remind our audience to go to the campaign to support TK. Remind them of the website again, TK, where they can go.
You can go look at my profile on Twitter. You can find me. I think my name is, you can see my name right there, Tarik Johnson. You can put that in and you can find my profile, and you'll be able to find my gifts and go there. But more importantly, follow me, and you'll be getting up-to-date information on the J6 cover-up, because that's primarily what I'm focusing on. If you look at my most recent tweets, I'm focusing on J. Thomas Manger, because I know what he's doing and I know why he's doing it. So that's my focus.
Exactly. TK, thank you. Godspeed, my friend. Take care.
Thank you for having me, Bill. Take care.
You got it. Our thanks to TK Johnson for being with us today. For more information and to be a part of this mighty movement to return to God and to save our country, go to BillMartinezShow.com. May God bless you and keep you and make his face shine upon you. May he be gracious unto you and give you peace. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a great day.